Kyle is getting ready to put a new door skin on this car, so we can set the other side on the rocker. But here's the thing. You can't just pull the old skin off and throw a new one on. There's multiple steps how to do it, and we're going to show you how that is in a second. But right now, the first step is once you remove the old skin, you're going to have to prep the entire surface and then use something called the weld-through primer, because the whole point of doing this is because it's rusted. Once we removed it, it'd be kind of ridiculous just to put a new door skin right back over it. So now we're going to go through the process of not only doing it right, but we're going to preserve it to where it never rusts again in the same areas. Anyhow, so if and when you have to deal with taking the door skin off, do not waste your time trying to unfold the edges. What you want to do is use a 36 grit sanding disc on a grinder and just pile it off on the edges, just like peeling an onion. You just want to take off the layer so you see all three pieces exposed and just pull it off. The only thing you're going to have to get rid of after that point is the spot welds across the top of the door. With that said, this is also one of the most complex things to do as far as getting the door fitment right, the gaps right, and the door itself aligned correctly. You can't see it from your perspective, but the minute you take a door skin off of the frame, generally the frame will start to distort a little bit. This one's got a bowed bottom end, which is not uncommon. The thing of it is when you go to put the new door skin on, you have to make sure that you set that back into a correct position. If you don't, you're going to have a style or gap underneath the door that's going to have a rise and fall to it, or it's going to wave. So the process itself is a little bit delicate. It's probably not really something for the novice, but it is something that if you have the touch and the tools, there's no reason why you can't do it. What we're doing is we're tearing down this motor, this 2-liter motor that came out of a donor car, if you will, a GTV out back. This is a Spica motor, and we're putting it in that white car with the green nose you just saw. Now, before we pulled this out of the car that it's been donated from, we confirmed that this car was running. Confirmed the pressure was good. Confirmed that everything about it was very functional. However, the owner of the white car with the green nose wants it to be carbureted. Now, let me tell you this, if you have a Spica car and you're not seeking dramatic performance differences, leave it Spica. Spica is an excellent performance for street. It's very reliable, it's easy to start, it's got smooth transition through performance levels. No downside of it other than people who don't know how to wrench on it. Anyway, what's interesting about this car is I'm taking off this motor mount and it's already busted. So this motor produces pretty good torque for it to bust the motor mount. Okay, so Kyle's getting ready to commit this door skin to the door frame, but before you do any of that, one, you have to take a little bit of time to make sure you got the skin where it lays right over the frame first. Now, the only thing that's actually welded on these is this top lip. So what we're going to do, we're going to take some of these profile Klecos and we're going to bring them down. Now, in order for this to be right, what you absolutely have to do is make sure you get this as far down as possible, because this gets resistance welded to the inner frame. So it's got to be close. Now, before we start any of the folding process or putting any of the urethanes in place to seal this door up, we have to make sure the door is going to fit the jamb properly. And we'll take note of anything that is intruding on that gap line. Okay, so this is clamped to the inner frame, and there's no movement between the skin and the frame itself. So I've got this all the way down. So that's about as far down as you're going to get. And the reason this is an essential process is because the style line that's right here needs to line up with the quarter panels on each side of it. So the hinges need to remain in place. Hang it on the car, make sure everything fits. If it's not sitting too long or too short, you'll know. And at that point, we'll take it apart again, lay the bedding material, which is just a urethane, on the inner skin, bond it, and resistance weld it all at the same time. Okay, so what Kyle and I are doing right now is we're putting in a urethane membrane. And what this is doing is basically sealing the fold where the door skin meets the door frame. Now, the key is not to get carried away with it and put too much on. Alright, that's enough. And you're better to peel it back a little bit into the door than to let it roll up over the sides, because what happens is when you go to fold it, it will prevent you from getting a nice tight fold. Okay, so it flows out. Your workability on this is, you got a little bit of time. It's important you pick a urethane that has workability time that's something you can work with. Because right now we got to lay this onto the frame. And we got to start to create our resistance weld. We already fine-tuned the welder, so we know exactly where the resistance weld needs to be. Now it's time to bond the top edge of the door to the frame. We'll go back and pull the skins after that. Just like when we did the mock-up, the most important job is to get this top portion squared to the frame. That way everything else moves down and folds into place properly. Okay, so we're in the process of tearing this motor down, and we're going to be doing that conversion back to carburetors. Again, I'm an advocate for leaving the car on Spica if it's already set up that way. But this is going into a step nose that doesn't have the provisions for the Spica setup, and quite frankly, the customer just wants to be on carburetors. There's nothing wrong with carbureted cars or Spica cars. This is all built on the predicate that your Spica system is running well. Now, amazingly enough, this motor's been really easy to tear down, so I have the sense that either it was recently built, which I doubt because it's got a lot of grease on it, or it's never been built before at all, and it's always just been a well-running car, because the tops of the piston domes are pretty doggone clean. The assembly of the car was fairly tight. All the original hardware was still there, which is really rare. But one of the indicators that you may or may need to have your Spica system looked at by somebody who really knows what they're doing is when you're changing the oil in your car. Now this oil is, it's still got some viscosity to it, so it's not like it's completely wore out. But when you're changing oil in your car, it's a Spica car, give that oil plug a sniff. If it's got a strong gas smell, I mean strong gas smell, the odds are that you may need to have your Spica system rebuilt. One of the indicators of a Spica system starting to fail not only is loss of power, but it's also that you will smell a lot of gas in the actual oil. And what that means is the seats and the seals inside the Spica system are starting to fail, and it's dumping gas into the oil pan. Alright, so roll that back a little bit. We're getting a nice tight fitment up here, then it starts to span away. So what we're going to do is we're going to get this side down a little bit so we can get a tighter fit. Ironically, this is called the door skinning hammer. There we go. Alright. Essentially, when you're doing a resistance weld, you don't want to hear anything popping. It pops means it's separated. This is not an easy tool to muscle. Let me go back the other way. We start from the center and we work our way out. One more to this side, and then we'll go to this side. crap, baby. You gotta move. You gotta move. You gotta move. You gotta move. Alright, so we got about half of our resistance welds in. Now it's time to go for the rest. This dog's trying to get an ear rub at the same time we're doing this. Okay, so now the skin's resistance welded to the car. Now we need to fold the skin. We're going to use a special tool for that. This is called a door skinning tool. I would not want to do this job without one. Essentially what we're doing right now is we're going to slowly bring the fold over. While I'm doing this, he's pushing the frame out so that the skin meets the door frame. So I'm going to roll towards you. You do this in phases, you don't try to do it all at one shot. And that's why this changes angles. Okay, so I just pulled the main bearing cap off. Thrust washer is factory original and not worn. That's a good sign. The crank has absolutely no marking, no gouging whatsoever. That's a good sign. And the bearings themselves look incredibly clean. Okay, it's 00, which means that it's a stock size bearing. That's a good thing. If they were 10 under, it would say, you know, 0.10 or 10 or something to that effect. If it was 20 over, again, it'd be the same thing, or I should say 20 under. Anyhow, so the good news is it looks like, as the motor was telling us when we were running it, that there's absolutely no issues with the motor's performance from stock indicators. I guess that's kind of another plus one considers when you have a Spica motor. One thing's for certain, Spica motors tend to not really lean out under street conditions. However, they will lean out on race conditions on the really high RPM band. But anyway, so in a way, there's another plus for a Spica motor because you have consistent fuel delivery from the fuel injection system that is relatively reliable in every way. You tend to have a motor that tends to last a little longer. Oh, I'm sure that is going to create all sorts of arguments out there, but the reality of it is the fuel delivery is every bit as relevant to keeping the motor alive as the oil is. Too much fuel, you get one problem. Not enough fuel, you get another problem. And not enough fuel, you can actually really burn up an awful lot of things internally, that is. Anyway, so right now I'll go through the rest of it and I'll go through the rod bearings as well, but if everything else is more or less like that, all we're going to do is a motor refresh and put some hot cams in to match the carburation that's going to go on this. Carburetors will be restored original Italian Webers, And I do mean restored, I don't mean cleaned. They're going to be restored Italian Webers. They're going to be matched to the motor, meaning that we're going to let the restoration guy know what size cams you're putting in and the overall engine performance expectations, and he'll get us really close on the jetting and the setup of the carburetors right out of the box. I've said this before and I'll say it again. I'd rather find a respectable set of Italian carburetors that are very rebuildable versus buying the new Spanish ones. It's not so much a knock on the Spanish ones as it is that, well, no, it is a knock on the Spanish ones because we've had too many have problems right out of the box. I think we did a video on that before.